guys. So before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Maeve, and I'm a Master's of Public Health student from the University of Albany. I am doing a health promotion internship with the Office of Health Promotion at Hartwick this summer. If any of you guys are interested in public health, a career, or a master's degree, let your instructors know because I'd be more than happy to answer your questions and help you guys out. So today we're going to talk about prescription drugs, why they're a problem on college campuses, and what you guys can do to help. So after going through this presentation, you guys will be able to understand the basics of stimulants, pain medication, and sedatives, know the reasons why students misuse these drugs, and identify prevention measures and alternatives to aid with prescription drug misuse on the Hartwick campus. So really quickly, what are your assignments? Well, the first thing you can do is take a 5-question quiz. It's really quick, just assessment of your knowledge and get you thinking before you get started. So this should be done before you go through the rest of the presentation. So if you need to, pause this and go back. After going through the presentation, you'll have an opportunity for a post-PowerPoint reflection. This is just going to be a quick 1 paragraph looking at what you've learned and critically analyzing it. And then for your engagement assignments this week, you're going to have 2 choices, but we'll go into more detail at the end. So let's get started. So these statistics are from a college prescription drug study. What this study was is a survey given out to undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. It looked at both the medical and non-medical reasons why students use prescription drugs on campus. So these 3 circles represent the 3 most popular types of prescription medications that are misused: pain medication, sedatives, and the highest, stimulants. The chart on the other side shows frequency. So over the course of the 12 months that this study was given out, this shows how frequently students misuse prescription meds. Now this chart here is very important. This chart shows when people started to use medical prescription drugs for non-medical reasons. So as you can see, it first started in high school, with pain medication being the highest. It then carries into college and in most cases gets worse and switched to stimulants. I want you to pause the presentation and look this over. Really get a good idea in your head about what you see here, because I want you to think about this as we go through the rest of the slides. Think to yourself, what's happening in high school and carrying into college? Lifestyle changes, interactions, responsibilities. What do you guys think could be causing people to turn to prescription meds for non-medical reasons? All right, so now we're going to play a really quick game of fact or fiction. So number 1, prescription medications are safer to abuse than other illicit substances. This one's false. Prescription drugs are just as dangerous as other drugs, especially as you start taking them more frequently at higher doses or mixing them with other drugs and alcohol. So number 2, unlike underage binge drinking and marijuana use, misusing and sharing prescription medication is legal. This one's also false. Doctors and pharmacists are the only ones who can prescribe this medication legally. Also, prescription medications are considered a controlled substance. This means their manufacturing, distribution, and use is monitored by the government. And in New York State, if you are caught using someone else's prescription medication, giving it out, or in some cases just being in an area where this medication is being abused, such as at a party, it's against the law. It's considered a felony. Some people can even get, on average, up to 1 year in jail. And depending on the amount you're found with, the location, or past convictions, this jail time can actually increase. Now this is from your Hartwick Student Handbook. And as you can see, prescription medications are taken just as seriously as other drugs. I really encourage you guys to look for a copy of this, or even just pause the slide and read this over. It's important to read your student handbook and have a general understanding of what is and isn't allowed on campus. I'm sure your instructors would be happy to help you find a copy. There's also a very interesting section just under this drug section called Amnesty. And essentially, amnesty is your protection. So this section just goes over different situations in which you are protected if you bring this to someone's attention. It also talks about people not needing to feel uncomfortable if they're struggling. You don't need to worry if you are struggling with an addiction or abusing this medication about bringing it to someone's attention because you're worried about getting in trouble. Again, there's protections in place and even programs to help you. So I really encourage you guys to look over your student handbook and get a better idea of all this. All right, so the last one. Students often get prescription drugs from their peers. This one's actually true. Many people might not realize it, but friends, classmates, and family members are the most popular source of prescription medication. All right, so the first drug we're going to talk about are stimulants. So there are two major types of stimulants, and of these two major types, Adderall and Ritalin are the most common. You may also know of them by their street names of Black Beanies, Black Beauties, Study Drugs, Smart Drugs, Vitamin R, Speed, or Skippy. So what these drugs are, they're stimulants. They're going to stimulate your body. They're going to increase the activities and processes that are occurring within your body. This is going to help increase your alertness, increase your energy, and many people think that these drugs are going to increase or improve their thinking and learning abilities, but this just isn't true. These drugs are not prescribed to help you think better. So this is a picture of Adderall, and like other prescription drugs, it's good to just take the time to educate yourself on what these pills look like. As you can see, Adderall comes in many different shapes and sizes. Adderall is usually prescribed for attention hyperactive disorder, also known as ADHD. It's also prescribed for narcolepsy, which is a sleeping disorder in which people have a hard time staying awake. So Adderall is going to help improve their concentration, help them sit still, help them focus, and increase their energy and stay awake. However, Adderall is a Schedule II substance. This means that it's illegal without a prescription. It also means that it has highly addictive properties, which, like other stimulants, means that it has a high potential for abuse. So now, what are the negative side effects? Well, if you look here, there's high blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, lack of appetite. Many times, these short-term side effects can lead to long-term problems, such as heart problems, paranoia, increased anger. It's also important to note that with these medications and many other medications, doctors usually prescribe them first at a low dose. This lets them see how your body is going to react. Then, if you need more, they don't prescribe it all at once. They give you a higher dose gradually over time. So let's think about this. If somebody else is taking someone's prescription medication, that means that it's not their own dose. It might not even be the correct dose. And there's no doctor there to monitor the symptoms. So you're taking this drug all at once instead of maybe gradually. This can lead to many negative side effects, such as these. So the second drug we're going to talk about are pain medications, or opioids. So opioids are prescribed for severe pain, usually after a dental or medical procedure, a serious cancer treatment, or even just after a serious sports injury. If you look closely at this chart, many of you might already be familiar with these drugs or know their names: oxycodone, morphine, fentanyl. If these drugs are taken as prescribed, that means if a doctor gives it to you and tells you to take one pill every other day and you stick to this, chances are it's going to be relatively safe. It's when people start misusing these drugs that we have a problem. It's also important to understand some of these drug street names. You might have heard them referred to as happy pills, hillbilly heroin, oxy, or OC. So opioids are going to have many negative side effects: confusion, sleepiness, and more serious long-term side effects like tolerance. Tolerance essentially means that your body becomes used to these drugs, and over time you're going to need to take more in order to feel the effects. This can then lead to physical dependency and addiction. These drugs are also especially dangerous, like many prescription drugs, when you mix them with alcohol or other drugs, and this is what oftentimes leads to overdose and even death. So many of you might already be familiar with opioids because of the widespread conversation around the current opioid epidemic. The opioid epidemic is affecting communities across the country in many different states and counties. Even more locally, here in Otsego County, These drugs and this problem is considered a major public health problem. It's one of the county's top health concerns. So what exactly do the numbers tell us? Well, if we look at this chart here, over 130 people died every day from an opioid-related drug overdose. And in 2018, 10.3 million people misused prescription opioids. So how exactly did this even happen? Well, back in the 1990s, doctors began prescribing this medication more frequently. That's because drug companies reassured doctors that these drugs were perfectly safe and non-addictive. It wasn't until the data started to show otherwise that people became concerned. As more and more people started taking this medication, the numbers started to change. More people were being hospitalized, more side effects were identified, more addictions were being diagnosed, and more people were overdosing. People started thinking, wait a second, we do have a problem here. However, this problem is not an easy one to solve. That's because there's already lots of these drugs in circulation. Also, even after a problem was identified, doctors still continued to prescribe them. But what is being done? Well, there's lots of widespread health campaigns to try to educate the public and doctors. More time and money is being spent on research, and laws are constantly trying to be changed to make it easier for people to get help, for there to be more treatment options available, and to even make it harder for doctors to prescribe this medication. In fact, back in 2016, New York changed some of their laws. For acute pain or short-term and less severe pain, doctors can only give out a 7-day supply. This means that after a week, patients actually have to communicate with their doctors in order to get a refill. This helps monitor the problem. For more serious chronic pain, the CDC has education materials, guidelines, checklists for doctors. This helps doctors educate their patients, look for alternatives, and when they absolutely have to prescribe this medication, it makes it easier for doctors to understand the correct dosage and the number of refills. Now we're going to talk really briefly about fentanyl. Fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid. That means it's produced in a lab. It doesn't come from natural sources like other opioids, which are usually from resources found in the seed of a poppy plant. So fentanyl is prescribed for extreme pain. That means it's a very high dose, and even in very small amounts, it can be extremely dangerous. In fact, oftentimes people who overdose on fentanyl do it completely by accident. This is because they don't realize that the small amount they're taking is actually dangerous. Also, there's a lot of problems with contamination. People might get other drugs like heroin, which are contaminated with fentanyl, or they might buy a prescription med from somebody that looks exactly the same as something else. It might look completely normal, but the truth is it's made with fentanyl. So oftentimes people are taking fentanyl without even realizing it. So what exactly does this have to do with the current opioid epidemic? Well, if you look at this chart here from the CDC, it shows opioid overdose deaths in 3 waves. So during the first wave, at the beginning of the epidemic, people were mostly overdosing from commonly prescribed opioids. Then, over time, people began looking for something stronger like heroin, which we'll talk about more on the next slide. Nowadays, though, people are using synthetic opioids, stronger ones like fentanyl, and this is leading to the most number of overdose and deaths. So, why is the opioid epidemic occurring, and why are opioids such a big problem? Well, this is because opioids are highly addictive. What exactly is addiction? Addiction is a chronic disease. Individuals who are diagnosed with addiction are usually diagnosed because of their drug-seeking behavior. So these individuals are always looking for these drugs. They're craving these drugs. These drugs have almost taken control over them. This is occurring even though they're already experiencing negative side effects. So even though there's negative things happening to their body, these individuals are wanting more and more of these drugs, and they're having a hard time controlling this urge. It's a natural reflex. That's when they're diagnosed with being addicted. So how exactly do these people become addicted? Well, when you take these drugs, it works with the reward system in our brain. This reward system produces endorphins and other chemicals such as dopamine and serotonin. These chemicals help us handle pain and feel good, feel happy. This reward system is good when we're doing healthy behaviors like eating healthy, going for a run, or spending time with people we love. It makes us feel good about these things. It's when we start feeling good and getting these endorphins and dopamine and serotonin from something negative like drugs that we have a problem. Over time, your body actually starts to recognize the fact that you're feeling good from something bad. So it puts up a defense mechanism. This protection makes it hard for these drugs to make us feel good, or lessens the effects. This is called tolerance. So over time, your body tolerates these drugs. However, at this point, it's almost too late. These drugs have taken your brain captive. You're now at the point where you're craving these drugs and you're wanting these drugs to give you that effect, but your body is saying no. This is when people start to become addicted because they look to take more and more of these drugs to try to override their body's protection. This can lead to physical dependence, which means that you almost feel like you can only need this drug, you depend on it. This can lead to many negative effects. It can really take over your life. You might become so obsessed with looking for these drugs that you miss out on other things. It can also have serious effects on our natural reward system. So things like healthy eating and going for a run that made you happy before don't make you happy anymore. It can also have many harmful health effects and really serious withdrawal symptoms. So oftentimes when you take prescription meds, there's withdrawal symptoms, headaches, nausea, vomiting. And the more dependent you are on these drugs, the worse these withdrawal symptoms are. Also, the chemical changes that are occurring in your brain when you become addicted are hard to completely get rid of. That's why people often relapse. And this addiction behavior can lead to overdose and death. It's also why people start turning to something stronger like heroin. So heroin is known for having this really good high the first time you take it. So what happens is people start turning to prescription opioids and they're not doing it anymore. They're not making them feel their pain. They're not helping them feel good about themselves. So they look for something stronger like heroin. And they take it and they get this really good first high. Now they start trying to take heroin again and again to feel this good. But the truth is, they're chasing a high. They're chasing something that they're never going to reach. They're never going to get this really good high feeling again. But they're going to continue to look for it. They're going to take more and more heroin. This leads to overdose and death, and why it's such a serious problem. So as you can see, overdose is a major problem with opioids. That's why it's important to just educate yourself on the signs and symptoms of an overdose. Also, just like any other medical emergency, if you think someone's struggling or something serious is happening, the first thing you should always do is call 911. Now this picture here is of naloxone, also referred to as Narcan. This is actually an overdose reversal drug. It can help someone stop them from overdosing. It's actually becoming very common for police officers and EMTs to have this drug on hand because they need to use it so frequently. The cool thing is that even people like you and I can get trained on this. You can go on Google and look up a community training, keep an eye out for one on Hartwick. Sometimes you can actually even do this training right online. And oftentimes after taking this training, you're actually given the nasal spray, also called Narcan, to use and keep on hand in case of a medical emergency. So the next one we're going to talk about is sedatives or depressants. Sedatives might also be referred to as central nervous system depressants or tranquilizers. You might also be more familiar with their street names, which include zombie pills, A-, barbs, downers, or sleeping pills. So what these drugs are going to do is they're going to really calm everything down. They're going to calm the activity that's happening in your brain and your spinal cord. They're going to calm your nerves, relax your muscles. They're really just going to slow everything down. That's why these drugs are often prescribed as sleeping aids or to help with anxiety. So these drugs have many negative side effects as well. Dizziness, sleepiness. These sound like things that are going to make it hard just to operate in everyday life. Imagine driving a car when you're feeling sleepy, or trying to pay attention in class when it's making you have poor concentration. Also, while these drugs might have unknown long-term side effects, they are known to be addictive and dependent. These drugs can be especially dangerous when you start mixing them with other things. Even something as simple as allergy medication can cause problems, or something more serious like alcohol. So if you think about it, these drugs are relaxing you, right? They might even be putting you to sleep. So when you start mixing them with alcohol, it can make you more likely to pass out or black out. That's why, unfortunately, these drugs are oftentimes used as date rape drugs. So now we're about halfway through. I'd like you guys to do two things for me. The first one is check out this really cool website. It actually has interactive videos, both of which are scenarios in which someone has an opportunity to misuse prescription medication. Then, based on whether you answer yes or no, the story changes. It's really interesting and cool. I think you should check it out. The second thing, and the most important thing I'd like you guys to do, is to Google an addiction resource. This can be something educational, something helpful like a hotline, or a naloxone training in the area. Just something that you think would be helpful to a Hartwick student who's struggling. All right, go ahead, pause the presentation and get started. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed those videos, and I can't wait to see what resources you found. Now we're going to talk about the reasons why students feel the need to turn to prescription medication for the wrong reasons. So if you think back to the study we looked at before, they also looked at the top 5 reasons for non-medical use of prescription drugs. So for pain medication, it was to get high or relieve pain, sedatives to sleep or relieve anxiety, and for stimulants, it was to mostly improve grades or studying. So you might be thinking to yourself, wait a second, prescription pain medication is supposed to relieve pain. Sedatives are supposed to help you sleep, so why is this bad? Well, the key here is that it's non-medical uses. That means that somebody else is using someone else's prescription. They're not using their correct dose, and this can be dangerous. So one of the top reasons why students turn to prescription drugs, especially stimulants, are to help with their academics. So now I want you to think back to that chart in the beginning that talked about high school and college. High school and college are a time of a really big balancing act. You're trying to meet expectations maybe set by yourself or parents. You're trying to get good grades, but you're also starting to become more involved with clubs or sports teams. This can become really stressful and overwhelming, especially in college when you're responsible for more things. You're in charge of teaching yourself a lot of material, while there's also lots of outside distractions. This can become very hard for students. They oftentimes then turn to prescription medication to try to help them focus, to try to help them concentrate. They even use them to stay up all night and pull an all-nighter to study for a last-minute test. But the truth is, these medications aren't actually going to help you this way. In fact, studies show that many students who use these prescription drugs actually have lower GPAs. Also, they can make you jittery and nervous, which makes it even harder to concentrate in class. And many times, students will stay up all night using these drugs, but then they'll crash the next day. That's why it's important to just give yourself a toolkit. Think about healthy strategies to help you balance your academics and relieve stress. So the next reason why students often misuse these drugs are to get high. So they might mix them with alcohol, which as we know can be very dangerous. Or they might take them on their own to mimic alcohol. They feel like it gives them a better high and doesn't have the hangover like alcohol does. But again, this can be very dangerous, and it's this type of reckless behavior that can oftentimes cause people to become addicted. Now, an additional reason is to self-medicate. So what exactly does this mean? Well, it could mean that someone might be having a migraine, so they ask their friend for their pain medication. Or they might be feeling anxious or depressed very often, so they know, hey, I have a friend who takes anxiety medication. I'm going to start taking their medication too. This can oftentimes lead to self-diagnosis, which again could mean, oh, I have a hard time concentrating, I can't sit still. So now you self-diagnose. You say, hey, I definitely must have ADHD. So again, you take your friend's ADHD medication. But this can have serious problems. You're not necessarily identifying the problem that you might think you are helping. And again, a doctor is not prescribing you this medication. They're prescribing it to your friend. And this is illegal and very dangerous. So one of the major reasons why it's so easy for students to turn to these drugs is because they're easy to access. So this is due to the fact that these drugs are simply being prescribed more often. More people are being legally given these drugs by doctors. That means there's just going to be more of them on the campus. It also has to do with the environment of a college campus. So think to yourself, you're interacting with your peers more, you're in and out of dorm rooms. There's no central authority figure to watch over things, so it's a lot easier to take them or ask for them. Finally, there's peer acceptance. Unfortunately, these drugs are more socially acceptable by friends than other drugs. But that's because people have false misconceptions. They think these drugs are safe, which we've learned they're not. They also think, well, they're being prescribed by a doctor, so they must be okay, and they're probably not that illegal. But again, we know that's not true. They are illegal. And while it might seem like everybody's doing it, that's just not true either. So finally, we're going to talk about prevention, one of my favorite things to talk about. So what can you guys do to help prevent this from becoming a problem? Well, the first thing you can do is help others and yourself better manage your medication. There's lots of free resources online of charts that you can use to keep track of when you take your medication, how much medication you have left. This can help somebody just have less struggle and worry about missing a dose. Or it can help them notice if some of their medication is missing and they might not have been the one to take them. The next thing you can do is safely lock up your medication. This is a picture of a simple lockbox. It's one you can actually buy at Walmart. I actually used this one when I was in college. It's good to not only keep your medication, but you can also lock up important documents or money. And if you don't have a lockbox, that's okay. The next best thing is to put your medication out of sight, out of mind. Put it in a drawer or in a box, somewhere that only you know where it is. And it's always important to help yourself understand the proper disposal of unused or expired medication. And there's lots of good resources found on the FDA website. So another thing you can do to help is just understand the signs of abuse. So I really encourage you to pause the presentation or come back to this later and just look over this chart. It shows the signs and symptoms of prescription drug abuse for different drugs. There's also a link on here for a cool self-help test. So what this test is you can answer questions either about yourself or about someone else, and the test will help you identify if there is a problem or risk of abuse occurring. Now, one of the most important things you can do, and hopefully after going through this presentation you feel empowered to do so, is to educate yourself and your peers. So this means debunking those myths. Know what's true and what isn't true, so you can change the conversation and make this less acceptable. Also, understand the negative effects, the risk of intoxication, withdrawal symptoms, the problems associated with each drug, and addiction. And remember, it is illegal. And if you are struggling or someone you know is struggling, it's important to know where you can get help. Finally, something else I really encourage you to do is to have a plan for saying no. I really want you to guys, sit down with a trusted friend or grab a pad of paper and a pencil and just brainstorm. Where could I be and what situation could I be in that somebody might ask me to misuse prescription medication? Or what if somebody asks me to take mine? Just understanding what you can do and having a plan of bulleted points of what you can say could really help you if you're ever caught off guard. So now we're going to go into the alternatives. What are some positive health behaviors that students can have in order to avoid misusing prescription medication? So the first thing you can do is get help. So if you're having problems struggling with pain, go talk to a doctor. There's actually a doctor right there on campus, and there's lots of them in the Oneonta area. The other thing you can do is if you're struggling with anxiety, stress, simply just want to sit down and talk to someone about how to better manage your academics and social life, then go see a counselor. There's a counselor center right on campus. And if you're not comfortable talking to an adult, there's even the 50-50 peer health counselors, so you can talk to someone your own age. The next thing you can do is improve your study habits. This can make it easier for you to manage your stress, to not need to turn to medications to help you study. So there's lots of resources online that you can look up, videos, watch, worksheets, to identify how to study smarter, not harder. You can even go talk to your professors or your friends to find out better tips. The next thing you can do is find a safe, fun alternative, something that makes you happy. Grab a friend, explore the Oneonta area, join a new club, or even just read a book. Find something fun that you can do. This will also help you manage your stress and anxiety. It'll also give you a healthy alternative. The next thing you can do is be proactive. This means create a routine, which also ties into step number 6 of better manage your time. Again, there's lots of resources online that can help you schedule out your time. Know when you're going to study, when you're going to take a break, when you're going to do something fun. But most importantly, if you're going to create a routine, don't worry. Don't let it stress you out. Routines are only good if they're not stressing you out. That means if you get off track, that's okay. You're in control of the situation. You have the power to stop and re-routine. Create a new routine, reschedule something out. I really encourage you, think of some other choices. What do you think you could do? So now again, these are just some resources that are available on campus. So you have the Counseling Center and the Health Center. And then off campus, there's lots of things. There's even Twitter accounts you can follow. So here's the National Helpline. This is open 24/7. So if you or someone struggling, there's always someone there to talk. There's also resources and treatment centers in the Oneonta area, and there's also educational resources so you can find out more. So now I'd like you to take a second to do the post PowerPoint reflection. So this is going to be a quick one paragraph. Think about what are the top 3 things that you thought were most important. Why do you think they're important? And what are at least 2 things that you learned that you didn't know before? This can be new information or maybe something you thought was true, but now you know is false. Now for your engagement assignments this week, again, you're going to have 2 options. So the first option is to go on the discussion board and create a thread, so you can share information with each other. The first thing you're going to share is that addiction resource that we went over earlier, something that's helpful to a Hartwick student. The second thing you're going to do is share at least 2 study or time management tips. This can be a worksheet, a phone app, or simply just something that you do that helps you study better or manage your time. Option 2. This can let you get a little more creative. We would like you to create a poster or a flyer to actually be used on campus during the upcoming school year. This can be on any of the topics that we have discussed. It can be educational, teaching someone about the risks of addiction. It can be helpful by teaching someone how to better manage their medication, or it can just be a study tip or a bunch of different time management tips. Whatever you decide. The only thing you absolutely have to include is your addiction resource. So we want that resource to be somewhere on this poster. So now we've gone through the whole presentation. I hope you guys were able to learn something, and I hope you feel empowered to educate your peers and help prevent prescription drug misuse on campus. If you have absolutely any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your instructors. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with for your engagement assignments. Thank you.